But yeah, you have to always be looking around the corner because what you're doing today is not going to get you where you want to go tomorrow. So to your point of it's not just for business applications, it's for personal life,
Yeah.
everything. The questions that you ask signal what's important to you. But I think that willingness to learn, to close the gap for the things that you don't have, you also have to demonstrate that. Having that orientation that there's something local to a community that might look and feel and be done different, that for me has forced me to be more curious.
I'm so excited to welcome someone I've had the privilege of working alongside and watching grow into an amazing and extraordinary leader, Jolawn Victor. Jolawn and I worked together during our time at PepsiCo, where I saw firsthand her ability to think strategically and drive impactful results. Jolawn has been at the forefront of driving innovation and growth at some of the most dynamic companies in the world, from Headspace to Intuit to GoCardless. In this episode, we're diving into what it really takes to grow a big idea, from bridging the gap between strategy and execution to recognizing opportunities that can reshape industries. Jolawn's experience is a goldmine of insights for anyone looking to take their big idea to the next level. Hello, Jolawn. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I just am so proud of you on so many different levels. As I said before, I've had the chance to witness your expanding leadership and expanding roles, starting off, here in the United States, and now you're in London.
Yes, yes, and with Australia in between. So
In Australia in between.
global expat country hopping, all of the above.
I know I want to dive into that. But I want to first start with, you've led these teams from the US to Australia and now the UK. How has that global experience shaped your approach to leadership?
When I first moved to Sydney, of course, I was like Googling and looking up, who have there been other women of color who've had similar experiences that have moved across with their families. And this one woman, of course, now her name is escaping me, but they had done an article on her and she talked about how she felt like she was the best suited person for this job because of how much code switching she's had to do just in her life, right? You have your friend circle, you have your work circle, you might have your church circle, you have all of these different environments, and you're constantly adjusting how you package yourself to be
Right.
more effective in that environment. And so when she talked about moving abroad, somebody who might not be from that community or that culture or that environment, who could pick up the things that were most important and amplify them, or learn new languages, right? We've got the Queen's English here, American English there. I'm constantly saying like, call my cell or ring my mobile, depending on who I'm talking to. And that ability to code switch, I've grown up with that. So whether now I'm code switching because I'm talking to someone in France or Spain or Germany or wherever, it's actually been, for me, I think, an easier thing because I'm so
Oh.
used to fitting into different types of environments.
That's so fascinating because, I mean, as you mentioned, you've had to come into these global environments and these global teams, not only as an American, but notably as an African American, and even more notably as an African American woman.
Mhm.
What has that meant in terms of how you navigate not only the spaces in which you work, but the spaces in which you have to operate outside of work, right?
Mhm.
In just how you live and raise a family.
Yeah, I mean, the things, I remember when I worked at General Mills, I had this manager and somebody's birthday came up and I was like, well, there's two happy birthday songs. And he was like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, yes, there's the Stevie Wonder song and then there's the other song. And
Right.
so having that orientation that there's something local to a community that might look and feel and be done different, that for me has like heightened that and forced me to be more curious and to learn
Mhm.
those things so that you don't come off as tone deaf. Like I remember when I was still in Texas, but I had started the role of leading emerging markets for Intuit. And
Right.
so one of the countries that included was India. And so I had a call with the team. It was 2 a.m., 3 a.m. my time. and I hadn't done the research. It was like a big religious festival day in India, and it would have been like me joining the call without saying Happy New Year, on the 1st of
Right.
January. And so
Right.
things like that just widen the distance, I think, between a leader and their team. If those things aren't assumed, if you call somebody up on June 19th, if they say happy Juneteenth, the conversation is going to go one way than if they don't. And
Right.
so um, I've just now am more aware of how do I bridge that gap culturally.
So how do you do that? How do you build trust and collaboration across diverse teams and like diverse cultures, diverse countries? How do you do that? What's some of the experiences you've had in navigating that?
Yeah, it's building the relationships one on one. If you're working with someone, understanding what's important to them. I think a lot of times the more people that have kind of sat at your dining room table, that tells you what communities that you invest in and spend time with. If you think about a culture, a cohort, or religion, whatever, if they've not been at your dinner table, then, is that something that you really value and have relationships deeply that you're investing in? So I think it's the out of the office experiences, number one,
Mhm.
but then two, that cultural curiosity. So if there's an event, a holiday, lots of times at work, people will talk about something and be surprised that I'm not familiar with it. And I'm like, I've only been here for 4.5 years. I have the knowledge of a 4.5-year-old when it comes to UK history, right? Like,
Right, right, right.
what a 4-year-old knows, like, obviously, yes, I can do more learning at an
Research.
accelerated pace,
Yeah.
but just in terms of the amount of time that I've had to soak up information, I do a lot of like true crime on BBC to learn about UK history. I've got a little fact book about life in the UK. But then a lot of it is just lived experiences that you have to proactively go out and be a part of.
Yeah, I remember when I had a person from India on my team, and he had been in the United States for 20 years, but he said as long as he's been in the United States, there was still a lot of cultural nuances that he just didn't understand. I think someone was making a football reference in a conversation or a Star Wars reference in a
Mhm.
conversation, and he didn't quite understand the nuances and how that related to the overall conversation. So it's funny because we take for granted even the smallest nuances in our culture and how it impacts how we relate to others.
And I think letting teams know that you're open to it and you want to learn, right? Like
Right.
lots of times, folks are like, "Oh, have you done this? You should do this," right? Because I make it really clear that I'm here and I want to be a part of this culture and community. Sometimes Americans have the perception of, that they think that their culture and nationality is like the best in the world, and that there's no effort, no need to learn about other people. And so I lead with the fact that this is home now. This is where I live. This is where, some of my closest loved ones are. So this is where I'm committed to, and I want to soak it all in, right? I went to my first Premier League game, which is a football game, a soccer game, and all of the cultural rituals that come with that. I wanted to learn all about it, and so I was going to work and telling everyone, and they were telling me about all the different teams and who to root for and who to not root for in this environment. So all of that, like just opening the invitation that you want to learn, I think goes a long way too.
I love that. It's about being open, and it sounds like everyone is willing to pour in that knowledge and support you through that transition. I love that. Now, you have a lot of experience, of course, from, diversity in countries and backgrounds, but you also have a lot of experience navigating different industries, right? So by your career started in engineering. You mentioned General Mills earlier, and then you went into CPG and now tech and fintech. How has that diversity influenced the way you lead and how you think about growth in your current role?
Yeah, I mean, there's things that are the same and then there's things that are different. And I think every time I did an industry hop, I really had to be intentional about it. And so when I went from engineering into marketing, General Mills had a mentoring program, and you could fill out your preference for what type of mentor that you wanted. And they told me I had the most specific mentor request that they had ever seen. I knew I wanted a woman.
Right.
I wanted a woman of color. I wanted someone with a family. And I wanted someone in marketing. And so there was only like one executive that fit that profile at the time. And so we got paired up. And I knew that I learn through seeing. I'm like very visual. And so I wanted to see what a day in the life was like with her. And since I was from Minnesota, which is where General Mills is headquartered, when I would go home for the holidays, I could tack on an office visit to go see her. And so I ended up doing a day in the life with her team where she let me go around with a brand manager and go to all the meetings one day. And so then when I was applying to business school and I got to talk about why do I want to be a brand manager, I could say, I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've spent a day in the life. And from what I saw, even though it was a limited experience, I was still attracted to it. And so I had demonstrated the intellectual curiosity, but then also the ambition on the backhand side of it. So that was my first jump was, right, how do I be intentional to demonstrate my commitment here? When I shifted from marketing into Intuit, I was shifting from marketing into product management. Never have been a product manager a day in my life. Never had professionally coded, which is what PMs are
Right.
driving teams that are building code for customer experiences. And the recruiter said to me, why don't you go to a hackathon? And I was like, okay. So when I Google looked for a hackathon, there was one the next weekend in New York. I flew to New York and did a 24-hour hackathon and came back and called her. I put together a couple slides of what I did, what I learned, what surprised me, and the outcomes. And she said, I've told hundreds of people to do that. And she said, you're one of, a few. On one hand, I can count the number of people.
Wow.
And so, again, demonstrating that ambition, there was a lot of transferable skills, but I think that willingness to learn, to close the gap for the things that you don't have, you also have to demonstrate that. So with each one of those, I feel like I have gone above and beyond to demonstrate how committed I am to learning the things that I don't know.
One of the things that I'm picking up as a common theme in you and your career is your willingness to learn, right? No matter where you are at whatever point in your career, and then the willingness to ask for help or be open to support from the people in your new community and asking for their support as you navigate the culture, to working with the right type of mentors and working with the right type of job expanding opportunities. I even remember early in your career when you and I were working together, you came into my office with that same willingness to say, here's the situation I'm in. How can we work together to help me navigate? And so I love that. I think that is a true nature of a leader, of always being open to learn, always be willing to ask for help and to be aware of what you don't know and bringing in the right people to help you navigate to get to a better place.
Yeah, I guess so. Now that you pointed out, that's just my orientation. I'm like, if you don't know, ask someone, right? I mean, that's the
Right.
ultimate chat GPT. Now you can do it, privately without people seeing, all the things that you ask, but there's no shame. And I think, when you talk about how do leaders inspire people, I think a piece of it is that humility that I just, wear on my sleeve. Like there's things that I know and there's things that I don't know. And the only way that I'm going to close that gap is, by being humble about that and saying like, I'm at zero. I'm at day one on this. So
Now at GoCardless, you're driving growth in an incredibly competitive fintech landscape. How do you use that same curiosity, right? That same desire to learn, to figure out how do you look for growth opportunities and navigate this new landscape?
yeah. So for those who don't know, GoCardless, we do bank payments. So we specialize in direct debit, which in the US, I think a lot of people who sign up for gyms use direct debit. If your energy bill, right, it just comes out every month. You don't have to worry about it. So we do that at a much larger scale globally. And I think to answer that question, it really started with my experience at Intuit, which was very customer focused, customer driven. We spent time with customers. We wouldn't just do interviews or ethnographies or things like that. we would go to an accountant's office, we would go to a small business and just watch them for a day. And so that's how we learned what the problems were that they were experiencing. I would have accountants that would say, oh, my office is 100% digital. And then you go there and you watch them send a fax. And it's not that, that they're lying to you. Their ambition is to be there. But the reality is that because of tools and processes or lack of, kind of risk taking to try something new, there's still some challenges and things that they want to change. So that was kind of the root of how I approach problems today at GoCardless. Number one, I think using the product is essential, using competitor products, and then identifying where's the biggest friction. What are the biggest pain points today that customers can't even articulate, right? Before the iPhone, nobody would have said, my phone doesn't allow me to take photos, record videos, watch movies on the internet, and send, voice text messages, because we didn't know that
on the
was
same device,
right? Like nobody could articulate that problem.
Right.
But if you spend enough time with customers and you start to see, oh, like people are spending more time, consuming content. People want messages to be sent instantaneously. Then you start to think about, how could I solve this problem in a different way, in a new way? So at GoCardless, a lot of that for me is being aware of what's happening outside of the four walls of GoCardless. There's constant changes within the payments landscape, right? Right now, Apple Pay, everyone just uses Apple Pay. And there's like technology behind that where Apple has the capability, it's called near proximity technology that allows you to, make a transaction by holding your phone close to something. They've locked down that, right? Like, how do we think about that expanding in different countries? And so being aware of how technology has changed, being aware of regulatory changes, and then combining that with customer problems, like that's where the unlocks happen.
You talked a lot about, leveraging data from, the consumer insights, as well as trying to figure out how to integrate your own understanding of that data, your intuition. How do you as a leader balance using the data and looking at the data with using and leveraging your own intuition to make decisions?
Yeah, the data gives you the zip code, tells you where the problem spaces are. But then you've got to, I think, be in that moment when the aha happens. At Intuit, we were launching TurboTax Live, and at the time it wasn't even called that. So this was like tax year 2016 or 2017. And we were trying to find a way to help people do their taxes on their own, but reduce what we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so we wanted to give taxpayers who wanted to do their own taxes access to tax professionals to ask that question, right? You've moved, you had a baby, you started a new job, and you're concerned that you've done your taxes wrong and that you're not going to maximize your year-end position. And so this is pre-COVID, so Zoom, what we're doing was not as commonplace. And we enabled customers to speak to an accountant face-to-face. And once we saw that they could have that face-to-face connection and ask their question within the first 30 seconds, that relieved all of their tension and anxiety. That's when we were like, that's the aha. So we knew that there was something there with getting people connected. But how they were connected, was it a text? Was it, video? Was it email? Was it whatever, coming in face-to-face? Video was that unlock. And we only had that aha, really powerful wow moment when we could see customers interacting with the accountant on the team, Mike, and seeing people being like, yeah, it doesn't matter what it costs. Like, this was so helpful. No, I got all my questions answered. Like, just send me the bill. We were like, okay, yes, we figured it out.
Right. So spending the time with the customers that really help you build that intuition.
Yeah, or seeing their reaction when that aha moment happens, like whether it's an unboxing moment, when you would first get an Apple product and that you would get the package and it's like, ooh, this is premium. Like, this is, you felt like you're getting your money's worth before you've even seen that AirPod or whatever is inside of it. So that moment is like moment of truth, capturing that.
How do you build that culture of spending time with the customers and building that intuition in a fintech industry where there's so much focus on the coding and the technology and the kind of technical capabilities, how do you build a culture of wanting to spend that time and leverage that understanding with your customers?
I think it has to start, it has to be part of the value threads of the organization. Intuit's founder, Scott Cook, he started the first Intuit product, which was Quicken, actually at his kitchen table with his wife. They were balancing their checkbook, or she was balancing the checkbook, I believe. And she was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so he started with solving a problem for his own family. And he thought, wow, if I have this problem, other people probably have this problem. And he scaled it from being a consumer problem to solving that problem for businesses. And so he had that orientation from day one and has therefore built an organization that values that. Intuit does things called Follow Me Homes, where every quarter, every single employee is spending time with customers with no agenda. You don't have a set of questions that you're going in where you're like, do you like this? Should we make it red? Should we make it purple? You're just saying, what's going on? How is your day? Like, what would make it better? How can we help? And it could be related to your software, or it could be other things. When it's other things, that's where you see where new problems are that could be adjacent to your current revenue base. So you solve even bigger problems that have a bigger impact on your P&L.
Oh, I love that. I've heard so many talk about how sometimes the biggest ideas are the ones that you're dealing with yourself in your own personal life. So if you're, having this problem, then there may be others having this problem. And so your job is to figure out how many more are having that same problem and how do you get the solution to them as quickly as possible.
And I mean, I love what you say about personal life. Like, I would come home talking about D for D is Design for Delight is the design thinking, branding internally that Intuit uses. And so I would come home talking about like writing down customer problems and putting yourself in your customer's shoes. And at the time when we were living in Texas, all of our kids were little then. And so they would wake up in the middle of the night and come downstairs and wake us up. And we didn't like that. We were trying to get our 8 hours of sleep. And so my husband said, why don't we apply D for D to this? He said, why don't we walk a day in the life of our customer's shoes? And so he spent the night upstairs where the kids slept and realized that at 1, 2 a.m., our heat was clicking off then, and the kids were getting cold and waking up, and that's why they were coming downstairs. There's no way that they could have articulated that to us, you know?
Yeah.
And so once he spent the night up there and realized what was going on, we changed the setting on the heat and then we could get our sleep again. So to your point of, it's not just for business applications, it's for personal life,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think, in fact, it was a leader from Intuit that coined the phrase, don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I say to my clients all the time, because what happens is you think you have a really good idea and you want to, execute that particular idea in the way that you originally thought of it. But sometimes that's not the right, you're falling in love with the solution, right? You have to figure out what is the problem that I'm trying to solve and constantly ask yourself those questions like, how do we solve the problem versus just figuring out how to execute the solution, which is, I think, a challenge a lot of leaders fall into.
Exactly.
Yeah. But okay, now let's talk a little bit more about how you're leveraging that same understanding, that design thinking, that intuition for the customer into your role at GoCardless. One of the things I think is fascinating about a lot of the roles that you've done, either Intuit, Headspace, and now at GoCardless, is that these are big ideas that's already been in the marketplace. And your job is to grow them, right, even further and take them to the next level. How do you really, truly take that understanding of customer, design thinking and building the intuition with the customer, as well as looking at a business that's, already in market and figure out how to grow it even further?
Yeah. I mean, it's having a smart team, right? Like folks that know how to build and iterate quickly and deliver value. Sometimes teams work on really big things that take them months and months and months. And to your point, by the time you've released it, maybe it's not relevant anymore. So the team at GoCardless, they're constantly experimenting and iterating and trying to move as quick as they can. I think that's a big piece of it. But then also giving the team the clarity of what's the problem that they're solving and then getting out of their way. We recently launched something that enables customers to collect payments more quickly and have an easier onboarding process. And we launched it for a subset of customers. We didn't solve what that looked like for everyone because we wanted to get it out in the market as quick as possible. We learned that there was some friction that we created for other customers. And so now we need to go back and expand that experience for more customers. But if we had built it that way the first time, we would have never even launched it yet, right? We'd still be building it. So I think a piece of it is what can you build as quickly as possible that has the highest level of fidelity, but then also just give teams the problems to solve. Don't give them the how, you just give them the outcome, the metric that it's supposed to impact, and then get out of their way.
I love that. I love that. So then how do you help your teams build that curiosity on how to solve that problem and that understanding of how to solve that problem? Because what I'm hearing you say is the best way to grow and to continue is to have that strong team that can explore those problems. But how do you help them and inspire them to continue to stay curious as you have in your career and to continue to look at the customer from a design thinking perspective?
I think you've got to hire them from the beginning, right? Like, I think you've got to hire people that have demonstrated that in the past. Because sometimes there's people, I don't want to say you have it or you don't have it, but you definitely want people that have got it, that are just hitting the ground running versus you having to build that up in everyone. So that's a piece of it, is like screening for that at the front door. And then I think there's just constantly modeling it and spending time with customers. If you're in a one-on-one or an all hands or a meeting and you say, hey, last week I was speaking with customer X, and I learned from them this, that is you constantly demonstrating and leading with the behaviors that you want your team to have, right? The questions that you ask signal what's important to you, right? At the dinner table, when the kids come home from school and I ask them, who did you help today? I don't have to have a long conversation about how being generous and helpful is important, right?
Right.
After you've
You're
asked that three
starting.
times, by
Right.
Wednesday, the kids are like, oh, let me tell you who I helped, So I think your questions are really important.
That's a great perspective in saying, you're setting the expectation through your own behavior and the types of questions that you're asking, right? The types of things that you're curious about inspires them to be curious about those same things, right? So if they're hearing you ask, say the same questions over and over again, then that's going to inspire them to be just as curious to make sure that they can have those answers for you.
Yeah.
Inspiring curiosity, I think, is a great nugget, right, that we're talking about here. And inspiring, intimate knowledge and building that intuition with your customers and doing that. Now, as you've looked at, trying to inspire, trying to grow, how do you look towards the future? How do you ensure GoCardless stays ahead of trends while still maintaining and being true to its mission?
I think that has to come from that hunger to see what our competitors are doing and to want to do it better, right? There's no way that you can be successful if you're not seeing, like my son, he plays volleyball. And so after a game, he comes home and he looks at the game videos, right? He looks at when he made a mistake. He looks at when the team was successful. He looks at, I'm assuming, what the other team is doing and how do they play. And then that tells you, one, what's out there in the marketplace, but then two, how you can be doing that better. I think that's a piece of it. But then also, you've got to nail what's in your current year plan, right? Like it's one thing to have awesome plans, but if you don't execute on them, right? Like I have plans to go to the gym and to do all these things, but if I don't get up and go,
right,
those muscles aren't going to grow. So I think a piece of it too is what is I'll call it your operating system that allows you to inspect what you've built, that allows you to make adjustments, and then to come back then later again and do that inspection cycle again. So whether that's quarterly planning or daily stand-ups. I was listening to a podcast by Revolut, which is another banking company, a competitor, right? Staying staying on my toes. And their chief growth officer was talking about how he runs his teams. He does weekly business reviews. He thinks that if you're doing monthly or quarterly, you've waited too late, right? A team has gone down this path. And if you've quickly reached a dead end, what is the point of spending 3 more weeks wasting time on that? So he does weekly QBR, weekly business reviews. So whatever that cadence is, be clear with what that looks like. Be clear with what's the conversation? What's the agenda for that meeting, right? Are we just doing bullet points? Because sometimes employees have no idea what they want and they create 50 deck slides. And really all you wanted was like 2 data points.
Right.
So how can you as the manager be clear with what it is that you want to have that conversation about, and then be clear about the frequency and the cadence at which that takes place?
No, I love that you said something. You drop a lot of these really gold nuggets about you listen to the podcast of one of your competitors, right? And you learn. And I think there's something, again, going back to your willingness to learn, your willingness to get information from wherever. You were listening to your competitors, your peer at a competitor company, and learning from them. And I think that is something really smart and really nuanced that helps you be successful in your career and think about how do you stay ahead of the game.
Yep. And on that, actually, he talked about they have one metric that is their guiding metric, and I still haven't found what that is for us at GoCardless that I think will be the most inspiring. Yes, we have revenue and all these things. But I think I have an idea of what it should be. But for his team, it's app downloads in each country. He wants Revolut to be the #1 app download in every country. And that's the only metric they look like. If Portugal went from 17 to 12, great, they're winning. And so I think having that clear, Steve Jobs for Apple, I want people to have 1,000 songs in their pocket. Like, how do you have your team focused on one really ambitious, customer focused metric? It's like revenue is not exciting because that's internal, but when it's something that measures the behavior and the outcomes that your activities would then result in from the customer, that is the right type of metric. And when you have one number that everybody is focused and headed in their direction on, when I was working on tax in Texas, we wanted accountants to be able to do their tax return in 2 minutes. With complete accuracy. So how do you have something that's really bold, really ambitious, really clear, that everyone is marching towards? That is the other half of execution, great talent, and then super clear vision.
I love that. So what you mentioned, and I don't want to lose this, is that one metric has to be based off of the desired customer behavior, right? So revenue, to your point, is an indicator of that customer behavior, but how do you find that specific behavior that you want your customers to demonstrate that eventually will lead to the revenue, right? Exactly. But how do you kind of measure it earlier in the kind of journey in their process? Like, what is that one thing that you can rally everyone behind? And because there's so many different points and data and information and that's thrown at you, but identifying that one big metric that is an indicator of the desired consumer behavior that you want everyone to rally behind. That's a really big nugget. I love that.
Yep. And everyone will be headed in, right? When people are unclear, it's like, is it going to move this metric? If it's not, then you shouldn't be working on it, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that gives clarity too. I love clarity. Awesome. So when someone is trying to grow a business that's already established, right? That's already, been in the marketplace, winning in the marketplace, and trying to take it to the next level. What advice do you have for people in a similar situation that is focused on that next level growth and taking it to places that's never been?
A couple of things. There's always places where you're not green, right? So I think as a baseline, you just have to always understand the mechanics of your business. Where is your business model, amber or red, that you can tackle? So that's the foundation. Then there's what's happening externally, right? When we think about the Blockbuster example, right? If Blockbuster had only looked at their P&L, they would have never realized that this customer behavior was happening outside of them. And it wasn't even just like why Netflix was so successful. It wasn't even just the online streaming. The technology was changing around us. The ability for data to be sent into a home at faster speeds was also taking place at the same time. And so the combination of what you have the internal capabilities to do, what's important to the customer, but then also the technological landscape that's evolving around us, like you have to keep your pulse on that.
No, I love that. And you said something that I want to pull out a little bit. You said that if Blockbuster had looked at their P&L and saw the consumer behavior changes, right? Like you have to look at consumer behavior and look for the consumer behavior in everything. You've talked about looking at consumer behavior in the beginning when you're doing your research and building that intuition. You talked about looking at the consumer behavior in how you create metrics, right? Making sure that your metric is anchored in consumer behavior. And now you're even looking at how do you analyze your P&L and what does it tell you about consumer behavior? So you really are anchored in having that intimate understanding and being constantly curious about consumer behavior at every point, at every step point of the way, from defining the opportunity to building it to growing it. How do you stay connected and look for the consumer behavior and look for the changes in consumer behavior and how it tells you how to navigate your business? I love that.
Yeah. When I was on innovation on Lay's, we had Lay's lightly salted in the marketplace, so it's reduced sodium chip, and the cohort at the time I think that was consuming the most of it was like I think like consumers 50 plus, and maybe we're experiencing like hypertension or whatever, but still wanted flavor. And so we introduced flavored lightly salted, right? Like, can you imagine? We never had barbecue lightly salted before that. We didn't have sour cream and onion. And these were existing flavors that were already really winning in the portfolio. So, like, keep shining, strengthening your towering, your strength. So, the thing that has differentiated you and set you apart, you have to continue to invest in that and be world class at that. Like, you can't let somebody else eclipse you in that space because you're not continuously investing in it. So if Lay's barbecue chip is the best one on the marketplace, then we want to be the best for people that are eating reduced sodium. We want to be the best for those that have reduced fat, dietary restrictions. We want to be the best for all of those areas. And so not only do you have to introduce new product lines for the things that are new and they're changing, but you can't let yourself dilute that thing that is your strongest value prop in the marketplace.
I love that. That's brilliant because, even in your Lay's example, that was a big idea. But it was simple, right? The simplicity of the idea is what made it a big idea. You want to give people who want more flavor, well, you give them more flavor. And we already have, a strength of flavor. I mean, we both know that Frito-Lay and Lay's are the champions when it comes to developing amazing flavors. So use your towering strength and apply it in new markets to see how it can help you grow. That's brilliant. I love that. Now, I want to wrap up a little bit and just talk about, how do you empower the next generation of leaders, the next generation of innovators? What will be the one leadership lesson that you learned from this global dynamic career, operating in different markets, different cultures, operating in different industries? What would you want the next generation of leaders to know and to take away from your experiences?
I would want people to be comfortable with themselves. I think a lot of times people ask me all about things like imposter syndrome, like, oh, clearly you've been in environments where you've been the only, and, what is it like? How do you deal with imposter syndrome? And that for me is a really hard question to answer because I'm not faking who I am, right? Like I'm not a fake Jolawn. I am me and I come with strengths and with flaws. And so I think having that humility, having that vulnerability, leading authentically is so important, and I think has helped me to be where I am, but also giving other people that permission. I work with so many people that are intellectually so smart, and are battling with some places where they're not confident leading in those places where they're strong. And you can tell how it's holding them back from having a greater impact or having greater success or inspiring even more people. And so I think the quicker that leaders that are up and coming can embrace and be comfortable with who they are, flaws included, helps you to be more successful. And you don't have to emulate somebody else. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. And that's the secret.
That's huge. I think in this world, particularly in this social media world where it is really easy to fall into the trap of comparison, right? The trap of this is what success is supposed to look like, that the real truth comes from what's already existing. And you've already acknowledged your willingness to be humble, your willingness to be vulnerable and ask for help or support others that need help. And that's been your secret sauce, and that what protects you from imposter syndrome. I don't think all of us have imposter syndrome when you have no choice but to be yourself. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And on that, I wanna thank you so much. I love this conversation. I love being able to talk to you about just your journey. I mean, we have the privilege of talking about a little bit of everything,
Yes,
and I'm just so proud of you, Jolawn.
thank
I know I
you.
tell
I'm
you
so
this.
proud that I know you and that you shaped this leader, right? Like I remember making it was like a presentation for something. It was like AOP or something, and you were like, you have to tell a story with your words. You have to bring it to life. And so, each leader has taught me something that I take on to the next chapter. And so how to tell an amazing data-driven customer backstory, I learned that from you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We will conclude this episode of Anatomy of a Big Idea. Thank you,
Thank
Jolawn.
you, Toria.